It began with an unscheduled convoy arriving at a London hospital long after official visiting hours had ended. Witnesses expected senior aides or security staff. Instead, they saw William and Catherine step from their vehicle with faces marked by worry and urgency. Within hours, rumors swept through royal circles. Something devastating had happened, and whatever news had reached Kensington Palace was serious enough to bring the future king and queen directly to a hospital bedside. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, very little made sense. The royal household is known for maintaining composure even during difficult moments, carefully controlling information and ensuring that private family matters remain exactly that private. Yet this situation felt different almost immediately. Reports began circulating that a deeply troubling message had reached William and Catherine earlier that day, interrupting what had otherwise been a carefully planned schedule. Within a remarkably short period of time, engagements were quietly reviewed, communications between senior aides intensified, and conversations that normally unfolded behind closed doors appeared to take on a new level of urgency. Those familiar with royal operations noticed subtle changes. Nothing dramatic, nothing officially acknowledged, but enough to suggest that something significant was unfolding beneath the surface. As the evening progressed, concern spread through royal circles with unusual speed. Palace staff, who were normally approachable, reportedly became guarded in their responses. Questions were met with polite but firm silence. Even experienced observers who had spent years covering the monarchy struggled to obtain clear answers. The absence of information only fueled greater speculation. Why had William and Catherine made such a sudden journey? Why had the visit taken place so late at night? And perhaps most importantly, who exactly were they visiting? These questions echoed through media offices, royal correspondence networks, and among those who closely follow every development involving the family. The mystery deepened because this was not the kind of appearance typically associated with routine medical appointments. Sources close to royal watchers suggested that the atmosphere surrounding the visit carried a distinctly emotional weight. Witnesses described a seriousness that immediately stood out. There was no attempt to attract attention, no public messaging, and no carefully managed announcement. Instead, everything appeared focused on one objective: reaching the hospital as quickly as possible. That urgency became the center of speculation. For many observers, it suggested that whatever news had arrived at Kensington Palace had not simply been concerning. It had been personal. As whispers spread, attention naturally turned toward the wider royal family. Had a senior relative fallen ill unexpectedly? Was there a sudden development involving someone already facing health challenges? Or was this connected to a matter that had remained hidden from public view entirely? The lack of answers created a vacuum quickly filled by theories and rumors. Yet behind all the speculation was a simple reality that seemed impossible to ignore. William and Catherine were not acting as public figures fulfilling ceremonial obligations. They appeared to be acting as family members responding to a moment of genuine distress. That distinction mattered. Throughout recent years, royal family has endured periods of uncertainty, personal trials, and intense public scrutiny. Yet even during those challenges, there remained a visible effort to maintain stability. This situation felt different because it appeared to strike at something far more intimate. The concern being expressed was not political, constitutional, or ceremonial. It was human, and that realization only intensified public interest. People who normally paid little attention to royal affairs suddenly found themselves asking the same questions as dedicated royal observers. What had happened, and how serious was it? Inside royal circles, concern reportedly continued to grow as the hours passed. Communications between family members increased. Schedules were examined. Contingency plans were quietly discussed. While no official statement emerged, the behavior surrounding the situation spoke volumes. Those closest to the monarchy seemed to understand that they were witnessing the early stages of a developing family crisis. The details remained hidden, but the emotional impact was becoming increasingly visible through actions rather than words. For William, the pressure was particularly significant. As heir to the throne, every decision carries public consequences. Yet in moments of personal hardship, those responsibilities do not disappear. They become even heavier. Catherine, meanwhile, was said to remain focused and composed despite the uncertainty surrounding the situation. Together they presented a united front, but those watching closely sensed the strain beneath the surface. Whatever had drawn them to that hospital was important enough to place every other priority temporarily aside. And as more questions emerged than answers, one thing became increasingly clear. The late-night hospital visit was not an isolated event. It was the beginning of a much larger story, one involving family loyalty, private fears, and a challenge that would test some of the strongest relationships within the monarchy. What seemed at first like a mysterious journey through the darkness was rapidly becoming the first chapter of a deeply emotional royal ordeal, one whose full significance had yet to be revealed. But the hospital visit was only the first clue in a story that would soon reveal a deeply personal royal struggle unfolding behind palace walls. Sometimes a single phone call can divide life into two chapters, before and after. For William and Catherine, insiders believe that moment arrived without warning, bringing news neither had expected to hear. In the hours following their unexpected hospital visit, the questions only multiplied. What had prompted such urgency? Why had normal routines been set aside so quickly? And why were those closest to the royal family suddenly moving with a level of caution rarely seen, even during difficult periods? According to reports circulating among royal observers, the answers may have begun with a message that arrived at Kensington Palace earlier that day, a message so serious that it immediately changed the atmosphere inside the household. While the exact contents remain unknown, those familiar with palace operations suggest that it was not merely concerning news. It was the kind of information capable of stopping conversations mid-sentence and transforming an ordinary day into one remembered forever. Sources indicate that within moments of receiving the communication, William and Catherine reportedly withdrew for urgent discussions with senior aides. The mood, according to various accounts, shifted almost instantly. Plans that had been carefully arranged were suddenly reevaluated. Staff members who normally focused on future engagements redirected their attention toward immediate concerns. The quiet efficiency that usually defines royal operations remained intact, but beneath that professionalism lay something more unsettling, an unmistakable sense that events were moving faster than anyone had anticipated. What makes these reports particularly intriguing is the speed with which additional measures allegedly followed. Security arrangements were said to have been adjusted within hours. While such changes are not entirely unusual for senior royals, the timing attracted attention. Observers noted subtle indications that protocols had shifted. Movements became more carefully coordinated. Communications increased. The machinery that supports the monarchy appeared to transition into a different mode, one designed not for routine public duties, but for managing an unfolding family crisis. To outsiders, these details may have seemed minor. To those familiar with royal procedures, they suggested something far more significant. At the same time, reports began emerging that family members were being contacted privately. Not through public statements, not through official announcements, but through personal conversations conducted away from public scrutiny. That detail alone fueled further speculation. Royal families, like all families, rally together during moments of hardship. Yet the apparent urgency of these communications suggested that this situation demanded immediate attention from multiple generations of the family. The possibility that relatives were being quietly informed added another layer of concern to an already troubling situation. As evening approached, those closest to the palace reportedly described an atmosphere unlike anything they had experienced in recent months. Some accounts spoke of shock, others described disbelief. What united nearly every version of events was a shared sense that the news had arrived unexpectedly. There had been no gradual preparation, no extended warning period. Whatever had occurred appeared to have emerged suddenly, catching even those closest to the situation off guard. That element of surprise only deepened the emotional impact. After all, uncertainty can be managed. Sudden uncertainty is something entirely different. Meanwhile, royal staff were reportedly instructed to maintain absolute discretion. This was perhaps the most telling development of all. Silence has always been one of the monarchy's most powerful tools. Yet the silence surrounding this situation felt heavier than usual. Questions from journalists were met with carefully measured responses. Requests for clarification produced little information. Even seasoned royal correspondents found themselves relying on fragments rather than confirmed details. The absence of official explanations created an atmosphere where every small development suddenly seemed important. Behind the scenes, preparations were reportedly beginning for what many believed could be a difficult family gathering. That possibility carried enormous emotional weight. Gatherings of this nature are rarely organized without reason. They often mark moments when families come together, not because they want to, but because circumstances leave them no alternative. And for a family already carrying the pressures of public responsibility, such moments become even more profound. The monarchy may project strength and continuity, but beneath the institution remain individuals confronting the same fears, uncertainties, and heartbreaks faced by families everywhere. As concern continued to spread through royal circles, one realization became impossible to ignore. The hospital visit had not been the beginning of the story. It had been the consequence of something that started earlier, a message, a conversation, a revelation that set everything else in motion. And while relatives quietly began rallying around one another, trying to navigate whatever challenge had emerged, another question lingered in the background. How serious was the situation they were trying so desperately to contain? Royal titles often create distance, but tragedy has a way of stripping away ceremony and reminding everyone that behind the crowns and traditions stands a family facing pain like any other. As concern continued to spread following the urgent messages and the unexpected hospital visit, attention gradually shifted away from protocol and towards something far more personal. The questions that had dominated conversations only hours earlier about schedules, security arrangements, and official responses began to feel secondary. What mattered now was family. Behind the carefully maintained structure of the monarchy, behind the centuries of tradition and public expectation, there appeared to be a group of relatives confronting a moment of profound uncertainty together. And according to those closely watching developments unfold, William and Catherine immediately placed those family concerns above everything else. Reports suggest that the Prince and Princess of Wales devoted their attention entirely to the unfolding situation. Whatever obligations had filled their calendars suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the challenge now standing before them. Those familiar with royal operations noted subtle but meaningful changes. Conversations became more private. Decisions became more deliberate. The focus shifted from public duties to personal responsibilities. In moments like these, titles carry little weight. What remains is loyalty, support, and the instinct to protect those who matter most. At the same time, private communications reportedly intensified among senior members of the royal family. Calls were exchanged, messages were delivered, discussions took place away from public view. While the details remained closely guarded, insiders suggested that there was a growing recognition that everyone needed to come together. The monarchy has weathered countless storms throughout its history, but the strength of any family is often measured not during periods of stability, but during moments of crisis. And this appeared to be exactly such a moment. What made the situation even more remarkable was the suggestion that long-standing differences were quietly being set aside. Families, particularly those living under extraordinary pressure, inevitably experience disagreements. Yet difficult circumstances often have a way of reshaping priorities. Reports indicate that personal frustrations and past tensions suddenly seemed less important when compared with a challenge confronting them all. The focus was no longer on old disputes or unresolved disagreements. It was on offering support where it was needed most. In times of genuine hardship, even the deepest divisions can temporarily lose their power. Meanwhile, activity surrounding the hospital reportedly continued to increase. Staff members became accustomed to a greater presence connected to the royal family. Additional arrivals sparked fresh speculation. Every development appeared to reinforce the belief that this was not a brief visit prompted by routine concerns. Something more significant was unfolding. Something that demanded attention not just from William and Catherine, but from multiple members of the family. The growing movement behind the scenes suggested a situation evolving in real time, with each passing hour carrying new uncertainty. Yet, despite all the speculation, one theme emerged consistently from those following events closely. Emotional support had become the immediate priority. Not public statements, not media strategy, not royal engagements. Family members appeared focused on being present for one another. That simple reality resonated deeply because it revealed a side of the monarchy rarely visible to the public. Beneath the institution stood individuals experiencing worry, fear, and hope. Individuals trying to navigate circumstances they could neither control nor predict. As these developments continued, practical consequences naturally followed. Public engagements were reportedly reviewed, with some commitments quietly reconsidered. Such decisions are never taken lightly. Every appearance carries significance. Every commitment represents duty. Yet moments arise when personal responsibilities must come first. The apparent willingness to make those adjustments only reinforced perceptions that the situation had reached a level of seriousness impossible to dismiss. Beyond palace walls, concern continued spreading throughout royal circles. Journalists compared notes. Observers analyzed every available detail. Supporters of the monarchy expressed growing anxiety. The lack of official information did little to ease concerns. If anything, it intensified them. Silence often speaks louder than words, and the silence surrounding this situation was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. With every passing hour, the sense of unease deepened. The family appeared determined to stand together, presenting a united front against whatever challenge had emerged. But beneath that unity lay a growing realization that events were moving toward a critical point. And as relatives continued to rally around one another, offering strength in the face of uncertainty, the questions that had first emerged after the hospital visit refused to disappear. In fact, they became even more urgent, because while the family attempted to remain united, the gravity of the situation was becoming impossible to ignore. As dawn approached, the lights inside the hospital remained on, and the steady movement of security personnel suggested that this was no routine visit. By the time the first hours of morning arrived, the uncertainty that had gripped royal circles throughout the night had only deepened. What had begun as whispers about an urgent hospital visit was rapidly evolving into something far more significant. Questions continued to circulate, yet answers remained frustratingly out of reach. The silence surrounding the situation was becoming its own story. Every passing hour seemed to reinforce the belief that the royal family was confronting a challenge far greater than anyone had initially imagined. And at the center of it all stood William and Catherine, whose actions suggested that whatever was unfolding demanded their full attention. Reports indicate that the Prince and Princess of Wales remained at the hospital for an extended period, far longer than many observers expected. This was not the brief appearance of public figures fulfilling an obligation before returning to their official duties. Instead, it appeared to be the response of two individuals determined to remain close to a loved one during a moment of profound uncertainty. Those following developments closely noted the unusual duration of their presence. Every additional hour seemed to add weight to the growing concerns surrounding the situation. If reassurance had been possible, it was becoming increasingly difficult to find. Witnesses who reportedly observed activity around the facility described an atmosphere marked by seriousness and emotional strain. While detail remained scarce, accounts consistently pointed to a mood far removed from routine hospital visits. The concern that had first emerged following the mysterious phone call now appeared etched into every subsequent development. For royal watchers accustomed to carefully managed appearances and reassuring public messaging, the absence of such signals felt deeply significant. It was as though the family was focusing entirely on what mattered inside the hospital, rather than what was being said outside its walls. Adding to the growing sense of urgency were reports suggesting that senior medical specialists remained closely involved. While no official information emerged regarding the nature of the situation, the continued presence of highly experienced professionals fueled speculation. Medical experts are consulted every day, of course. Yet within the context of everything else that had occurred, the sudden phone call, the late-night journey, the private family communications, and the prolonged hospital presence, the involvement of senior specialists inevitably attracted attention. Each new detail seemed to point toward a situation whose seriousness could no longer be easily dismissed. As the day progressed, additional reports began to surface indicating that family members were arriving discreetly. Not through grand entrances or public appearances, but quietly, away from attention whenever possible. That development resonated deeply because it suggested a family gathering under circumstances none of them had anticipated. The monarchy often appears united during national celebrations and historic milestones. Yet moments like these reveal a different kind of unity, one forged not through ceremony, but through shared concern and emotional support. Relatives appeared to be coming together not because duty demanded it, but because family did. Outside the hospital, meanwhile, media attention intensified dramatically. Journalists gathered, speculation expanded. Every small movement became the subject of analysis. The public's desire for information grew stronger with each passing hour. Yet despite increasing pressure, palace officials maintained their silence. No detailed statements emerged, no reassuring updates appeared. Requests for clarification reportedly met the same response time and again a refusal to comment publicly. That silence, while understandable given the circumstances, only fueled greater uncertainty. The less information became available, the more intense the speculation grew. Within royal circles, discussions increasingly shifted toward what might happen next. If the situation improved, would normal schedules resume? If it worsened, what decisions would need to be made? These questions lingered over every conversation. The absence of clear answers left room for both hope and fear to coexist. Some remained optimistic. Others prepared themselves for difficult possibilities. Yet nobody seemed entirely certain what the coming hours might bring. What made the situation so compelling was not simply the mystery itself, but the emotional weight attached to it. Behind every rumor and every headline stood a family navigating an intensely personal crisis, while doing so under extraordinary public scrutiny. William and Catherine, despite carrying the immense responsibilities of their future roles, appeared focused on something much simpler and much more human: being present when it mattered most. And while concern continued mounting beyond the hospital walls, among journalists, observers, and the wider public, the true heart of the story remained hidden from view. Because, yet even as concern mounted outside the hospital walls, the most difficult conversations were taking place behind closed doors. Every family eventually encounters a moment when difficult decisions must be made, and according to those watching events unfold, the royals had reached one of those heartbreaking crossroads. The uncertainty that had hovered over the hospital corridors was no longer confined to whispered conversations and private concerns. It had evolved into something far more difficult, a moment when hope, responsibility, and reality collided. Reports suggest that sensitive discussions were now taking place among family members, conversations nobody ever wants to have but which become unavoidable when circumstances grow increasingly serious. For days, attention had focused on the hospital visit itself, the urgent phone call, and the growing presence of relatives. Now the focus was shifting toward decisions, difficult decisions, the kind that carry emotional consequences long after the immediate crisis has passed. According to royal insiders, William increasingly found himself at the center of these conversations, not because he sought the role, but because responsibility naturally gravitated toward him. As heir to the throne, He understood the weight of duty better than most. Yet in this moment, he was not simply acting as a future king. He was acting as a son, a husband, a father, and a family member trying to support those around him while navigating uncertainty himself. Sources suggest he spent much of this period offering reassurance to relatives, helping maintain unity while emotions threatened to overwhelm even the strongest individuals. It was a burden few could fully understand, and one he reportedly carried with quiet determination. Beside him, Catherine emerged as a steadying presence. Throughout the growing crisis, reports consistently described her as a source of calm and stability. While anxiety and speculation swirled around the family, she reportedly remained focused on supporting those closest to her. In moments of uncertainty, families often rely on individuals capable of providing reassurance without demanding attention for themselves. Catherine appeared to become exactly that figure. Her presence offered comfort not through grand gestures, but through consistency, compassion, and quiet strength. As the pressure intensified, that role became increasingly important. Yet beneath these efforts to remain united, larger questions were beginning to surface. If the situation continued to develop, what would happen next? What responsibilities might need to change? What plans could be affected? Such questions reportedly lingered in the background of every discussion. While nobody seemed ready to confront those possibilities openly, they could not be ignored indefinitely. The future, once predictable, suddenly appeared uncertain, and uncertainty has a way of magnifying every fear. At the same time, palace operations entered a period of unusual tension. Officials reportedly reviewed schedules, reassessed commitments, and prepared for multiple possible outcomes. Nothing was confirmed, nothing was announced. Yet the atmosphere suggested preparations were underway behind the scenes. The challenge facing the family was no longer purely personal. It was beginning to intersect with the responsibilities attached to the institution itself. That intersection created a painful reality. Duty demanded attention. Grief demanded attention. And balancing the two became increasingly difficult. For a time, however, the palace managed to keep public attention at bay. Then small details began slipping into view, and the wider world started asking questions. Observers noticed unexpected schedule changes. Reporters began investigating unusual patterns of activity. The silence from palace officials, intended to protect privacy during a sensitive period, instead fueled greater speculation. Across the country, concern spread rapidly. Supportive messages poured in from people who sensed that something significant was unfolding. What had once been a private family struggle was gradually becoming a matter of public interest. And as curiosity intensified, pressure mounted for answers. The royal family now faced a challenge unlike any they had confronted during the preceding days. It was no longer just about managing emotions behind closed doors. It was about navigating the collision between private grief and public expectation. Every unanswered question generated another. Every day, without clarification, deepened the mystery. The institution built upon stability suddenly found itself under the spotlight of uncertainty. And when public curiosity finally collided with private grief, the royal family found itself facing an unavoidable moment of truth. Throughout royal history, some of the monarchy's defining moments have emerged not during celebrations, but during periods of profound personal hardship. As the days of uncertainty gradually unfolded, a subtle but important shift began to take place. The questions, fears, and speculation that had dominated every conversation were still present. But they no longer stood alone. Alongside them emerged something else: resilience. The royal family had spent days confronting circumstances that tested them emotionally, personally, and publicly. Yet amid that pressure, observers began noticing signs that those closest to the crisis were finding the strength to move forward. The challenge had not disappeared, the pain had not vanished, but the determination to face it together was becoming increasingly visible. Throughout this difficult period, William reportedly emerged as a steady source of leadership. The burden resting upon his shoulders was immense. As future king, every decision carried significance. As a family member, every decision carried emotion. Balancing those realities was never going to be easy. Yet according to those familiar with the situation, he approached the challenge with quiet resolve. Rather than allowing uncertainty to dictate events, he focused on providing reassurance to relatives and maintaining a sense of stability during a time when stability felt increasingly fragile. It was not the leadership displayed during ceremonies or public celebrations. It was something deeper, the leadership that emerges when people need strength most. Beside him, Catherine remained unwavering. Throughout the ordeal, she reportedly continued serving as a source of calm for those around her. While public attention intensified and speculation spread across the country, she remained focused on what mattered most: supporting family. Her steady presence became a powerful reminder that true strength is often found not in dramatic gestures but in consistency, compassion, and resilience. Together, William and Catherine presented a united front, one that seemed to reassure not only their relatives, but also a public increasingly invested in their journey through this difficult chapter. As family members continued to rally around one another, relationships reportedly grew stronger despite the emotional strain. Difficult moments have a way of revealing what truly matters. Old disagreements lose significance. Priorities become clearer. The events surrounding the hospital visit appeared to create exactly that effect. The crisis reminded everyone involved that beneath the responsibilities, traditions, and expectations stood people connected by loyalty and affection. In the midst of uncertainty, those bonds became a source of strength. Public admiration also began to grow. Across the country, people followed developments with concern and sympathy. Many recognized something deeply relatable within the story. While few could understand the pressures of royal life, everyone understood the fear of receiving difficult news, the anxiety of waiting for updates, and the emotional weight of standing beside loved ones during challenging times. That shared human experience created an unusual connection between the monarchy and the public. For a brief moment, titles seemed less important than emotions. What began as a mysterious hospital visit eventually became something much larger, a reminder that even the most famous family in Britain cannot escape life's most painful moments. As more details came into focus, the significance of William and Catherine's actions became increasingly clear. Their priorities had never been public appearances or palace protocols. Their priority had been family. That realization reshaped how many viewed the entire ordeal. The crisis exposed the monarchy's human side in a way few events ever could. Behind the institution stood individuals confronting fear, uncertainty, grief, and hope just like everyone else. In the end, the experience reportedly left a lasting impact on relationships behind palace walls. Challenges of this magnitude often change people. They alter perspectives. They strengthen connections. They remind families of what truly matters. While the pain of the ordeal would not disappear overnight, neither would the lessons it revealed. Hope had begun to emerge from the darkness, carried forward by compassion, loyalty, and resilience. But before the chapter could close, one final revelation would change how many viewed the entire ordeal. Because in the end, titles, palaces, and traditions may define a monarchy, but it is compassion, loyalty, and resilience that define a family. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.